Check one, check two. I think we're going. I think we're live here. Hello, happy Friday, whatever day of the week it is when you're watching this. The purpose of this video is to recap the week one live session and week one in general and introduce week two in the IBM Data Science Bootcamp. So let's just jump right into it. The purpose of week one was to introduce thinking like a data scientist, as well as introduce you to the course and the general workflow of the boot camp. So yeah, thanks again to everybody that joined live. We had a great crew on the Zoom, great engagement, love all the questions. So definitely keep that energy coming. There's a lot of content over the next 10 weeks, or I guess 9 weeks now, and just keeping that energy, keeping that curiosity, and continuing just to wonder about the world and about the content and the progression of technology up to and into the future will only benefit you in your longer career. So you should all be seeing my screen. I'm inside the course dashboards now. So I have a link to the recording here if you want to watch the original Zoom, or you can also find it backed up on this YouTube. But yeah, again, a big idea for week one, keep it big picture and don't worry about code. I know we showed some code kind of near the end, but we'll get into actually reading and writing code into week two. So just to recap some of the course expectations and how each week works. Each week starts Wednesday and runs through Tuesday the following week. So technically we're on day two of week two right now. You'll have asynchronous videos and readings that we call media sets that you'll start working your way through. Periodically through the media sets, you'll have discussion forums where you'll be prompted with a relevant question that you should respond to and also respond back to your other students. And Karen, the TA, and myself will be live in those forums every single day just to kind of add context, challenge you with your assumptions, and hopefully kind of start synthesizing the material of the week. Finally, in addition to the media sets and discussion forums, there will be hands-on labs where you will be tasked with writing and executing code in our IBM Cloud notebooks. Now, these will usually be Python. Actually, they'll always be Python. The books will dabble in some SQL code as well, but that won't be until week 4 or 5. And then finally, to end each week, there will be a quiz. This quiz was always going to be multiple choice, and it'll always be graded kind of live when you take it. I'm not sure if you have unlimited attempts or not. I think you have a decent number of attempts, though, on each quiz. And each quiz for each week counts for about 3% of your overall grade. Yeah, 3 times 10 is 30, and then the capstone will account for 70% of your overall grade. Karen and I will be reviewing those quizzes as well, but also call us out if you think any of the quizzes questions are weird or if you don't agree with any of the answers. Now, then finally, on the Monday of each week, we will have a live session where I will review the high-level concepts of the week, walk through some of the notebooks, usually including the final notebook, the, I guess, keynote of the week. And we'll also kind of discuss any questions you may have, in addition to any kind of the quiz questions or just content that you may have seen in the news recently. Let's see. For the live session, we won't be covering every single notebook in the hands-on labs. For example, in Unit 2 in Week 2, I'm pretty sure there's something like 26 notebooks, which is kind of crazy. We'll get to kind of my expectations for Week 2 here at the end. Now, we obviously won't be covering all of those notebooks in detail. We'll only be highlighting about 3 or 4 of them. So feel free to participate in our live session forum thread before the lecture that week. And if there's anything specific you want me to cover, place it there and I'll make sure to cover it. The quizzes, technically you can take and retake the quizzes until the end of the cohort, but you should be completing them weekly. There's no point in going back and answering questions about thinking like a data scientist in week 10, for example. I would expect you to be spending about 10 to 15, maybe 20 weeks or 20 hours a week on average. That's kind of a lot, so maybe just 10 to 15. If you're constantly finding yourself on the upper tier of that, even approaching 20 or exceeding 20, come talk to us. And if you're spending less than 10, less than 8, then obviously you may already know Python and some of this material, but you should be spending a little bit more time. Now, again, this is an average. For example, week 2 is a pretty heavy week as we go very in depth at a rapid pace about coding in Python. And then week three will feel a lot lighter as it's going to be building on a lot of the concepts of week two. So a lot of less new material and more expanding that into more complex problems. All right. For an example of a media set, let me actually pull that up. I'm going to go into, I guess, 1.3 a media set here. So here we go. We have our kind of media set. Again, the practice quizzes at the end of each media set are not graded. We'll go over what the quiz looks like at the end of each unit here in a second. But we'll see that we have some reading, and as we continue working our way through the media set, we'll have a short video to watch, and then some more reading, some more videos, some more reading, some infographics. And this will kind of walk through for a few pages here. We even have a lab here. So this is one of the first hands-on labs in Unit 1. If I click this link, it should open up a new hands-on lab. We'll come back to this in a moment. And then finally, once we finish the media set, we'll have kind of a short practice quiz just to kind of make sure that we're synthesizing the big ideas of the media set. Reminder, the practice quizzes at the end of the media sets are not graded. However, you may see the exact same questions or a version of these questions at the end of unit quiz. So that's an idea of a media set. Again, each week you'll have maybe a dozen or so of these media sets to work through. And finally, let's introduce the hands-on labs. So here's an idea of the hands-on lab that we showed. So in this case, I think it's maybe the first one, from data requirements to data collection. And it's running in our Jupyter notebook within kind of the IBM cloud here. And as we scroll down, we'll see, and we'll review these diagrams in a second, but we'll see various different code sets that we can run. And I've already run these. I ran these live during the lecture. But again, just to run them again, if I click into the first cell and run Shift Enter, we should be able to execute it. This little circle up here means that the computer is getting ready to turn on and execute the code. So this actually worked. We downloaded this CSV and you can see it right here. And for week one, you don't need to understand what any of the code is doing or even really how to read it. The big idea of the labs for week one are just to review what an example data science project will look like. And hopefully in 10 weeks from now, it should make a whole lot more sense to you. Yeah, even in this notebook, we didn't even have to write any code either. All the code was given to us. That won't be the case for every notebook you'll see in this course. Sometimes you'll be asked to write code. Sometimes it'll give you hints. Sometimes it'll give you solutions for the cells that needs to be filled in. But it gives you kind of a sense of what the hands-on labs will be like throughout the course. If you want to back up any of these notebooks to your own private folders or repositories, if you right-click on the notebook here, you can download as a Python notebook, which you can then put wherever you want. Same thing with the CSVs as well. Cool. Last thing to introduce in the media sets, we've talked through the discussion forums, so let's actually take a quick look at that. We'll see that 1.2 here is going to be a discussion. When we navigate to the discussion forum, you'll see that each week we'll have one forum, and within that forum we will have topics, or I also call them threads. So let's take a look at this one. If we navigate to our week one forum, we'll see that we have 3 threads or 3 topics going on here. I recommend following them. Definitely follow the lounge. We'll review kind of what each of these topics is. So first, the lounge is going to be where I will post as general updates, general just kind of ideas or memes or links that I find interesting. Now, this also be where Karen and other students, you can just drop whatever you want in there. It's just a casual place to hang out, post content related to that week's material. We also see that we have 2 topics or threads devoted to different parts of week one. We see that we have 1.2 exploring diverse data sets and 1.5 looking at pitfalls in data understanding and preparation. Finally, in most weeks, you'll also see a 4th thread or topic here that will be devoted entirely to the live session. Again, if you have questions, comments, or issues with anything that you want me covering live, that'll be where you'll post your options there. Finally, it's important to emphasize that each week will have a varying amount of discussion threads. Week 1 has 2. I think week 2 may have 2 or 3 discussion threads, and they typically range between 1 and 5 discussion threads a week. So just don't be surprised by that. So let's see what an example of this discussion thread looks like. We have our question, go find a data set out in the wild, and then ask what questions do you ask of this data set and justify your response. And you'll see we have a few students already kind of participating in this thread, and Karen and me responding to all these various topics here. So great conversation. Hopefully this helped you all kind of take that idea of this purpose of this discussion thread and synthesize it in a real use case. Cool. So far, all we've done is overview. Oh, we got one last thing for how each week will go, the quizzes. So if I go down to the end of week one, you'll see that we have this assessment quiz. We also have the module summaries. These aren't live. These are pre-recorded here. I wonder if that'll load. But here's an example of what the quiz will look like. So this is the graded quiz for week one, and we can see what, oh, you get 5 attempts. There you go. So question one, which of the following stages is the first stage of foundational data science methodology? All these quiz questions are going to be open book, open notes, so use whatever resource you want. Maybe we check the actual diagram and we find a business understanding should be the first one there. Whoops, I leaked the answer to the first quiz question. Hopefully that's right. Should we see if we were right? No, we won't. I'm pretty sure that's right. Yeah, it's definitely right. All right, cool. So that's an example of how the typical week will flow. So again, just to review, each week you will start with the media sets. You will then kind of progress your way through the videos, the readings, break up those videos of monotony with live discussion forums and hands-on coding labs. And then you'll end each week with a live session led by me, reviewing the high-level content of the week and a few of the notebooks, as well as a graded weekly quiz. So let's jump into the actual material that I want to cover in reviewing week one. Where is my discussion forums? Oh, also something interesting. If you go to the downloads, I find them interesting. I like going to the download section of each week, and then you can download all of these text files. And if you take all these text files and then upload them into an AI tool of your choice, it'll actually summarize the week for you. So I've done this maybe a few times in preparing my notes before the class. So maybe something just to look at on your own time as well. I find it a great way to kind of keep the weekly notes. And if you actually check my GitHub, you'll see the one that I created for week one already. I think it's the module one big ideas. So I did that exact same process. I took all those downloaded notes and then threw them into an AI tool to help summarize and give some high level ideas as to the week. So we'll probably review this in a second as well. Cool. Where were we? Let me find my discussion forum. Boom. Here is the lounge. And here is my week one recap. Cool. So we've gone over the course. We've reviewed kind of the expectations for how each week will go. And we've demoed the media set, the videos, the readings, the discussion forums, the hands-on lab, and the graded quiz. And hopefully you've already watched the recording of the live session. Cool. Let's get into the core ideas of week one. So, big ideas of week one is to start thinking like a data scientist, right? So, I had a few kind of high level ideas to hit on here. When most people think of data science, they typically think get some data, throw it into a dashboard, maybe build a machine learning model on it and call it a day. But that's really not all that a data scientist does. In fact, a lot of the work of a data science comes on either end of making those data products. And here, when I say data products, I encompass all of things like dashboards, right? Maybe with Tableau, Power BI, Looker, whatever. Machine learning models, maybe your XGBoost or logistic regression or whatever. But I also include things like agent AI powered applications, right? So maybe it's a RAG bot or a chat with your data tool, like something like Databricks Genie or Tableau's Ask Data. Or maybe this data product is actually a website, right? Or it was a data application is something that we're going to get into maybe week 7 and 8, where we start using Plotly and Dash to be able to create really interactive and powerful web applications that combine both modeling and BI dashboarding. Yeah, the most important piece of data science have on either side. So on the left of creating the data products is actually framing the business question as a testable hypothesis that we can use data to actually answer, translating that business question into that data powered question, and then finally doing all the work to create the data product. And then on the right, communicating the results in a way that stakeholders can act on. How do you actually drive decision making from the insights you're discovering? We talked about two methodologies in the way of thinking about data science problems. The first being the CRISP DM workflow. The CRISP DM methodology looks something like this. Start with the business understanding, the business question. What are you trying to answer? How do we translate it to a data powered question that's a testable hypothesis? Think scientific method. Data science is a science. You need to utilize the scientific method. Once we've translated this to a data powered question, how do we acquire the data, clean the data, prepare the data, use that data for modeling or creation of a data product or dashboard? How do we evaluate the utility of that model, that product, that application, that dashboard? And then how do we deploy our data product into production where it can be used to be actionable with stakeholders? And again, I want to be really clear on that data product. It can be anything from a dashboard to a machine learning model to an AI agent to web applications and data apps to even combinations of all of the above, right? AI powered kind of chat applications with your dashboards and things like that. So really, really important to kind of frame the creation of what we're trying to do. At the root of what we're trying to do is we want to create tools that are powered by quantitative information that help drive decision making in the face of uncertainty. The other methodology that we talked about, oh, here we go. Yeah, what is a data product? Like I mentioned, dashboards, models, maybe inference pipelines, chat interfaces over data, AI agents, all this good stuff. I got a couple links on things like data platforms and what these AI kind of powered dashboards and chat applications look like. So feel free to explore those as kind of modern representations of data products. I had a quick example using baseball. Basically, we're talking about defensive shifts. Where should I position my baseball players on defense to make it more likely that they will get an out or, yeah, get the batter out? How do we turn that into a data-driven question? Let's look at batter tendencies. Where is the batter most likely to hit the ball? Given that data information, we're able to then cluster using unsupervised machine learning to position our defenders. And again, we have quantified uncertainty here. 90% of the time, my batter hits the ball here. And if I put all my defenders here, they will make the out 90% of the time. But 10% of the time, he's going to go the opposite way and get that hit. Then finally, how do we relay this information in a way to communicate to non-technical stakeholders to actually convince coaches and players that this is where they should stand during a baseball game? And then just to reiterate that kind of idea of dashboarding and communication, I brought up this web application, this data application, if you will, featuring data powered by the Google Cloud platform. And even if you know nothing about baseball, you can quickly look at this and see things like, where's my little pen? This guy Shohei Ohtani, he has great metrics in all of these things, and that's really good. So this guy's probably pretty good at hitting baseballs. We even have a representation of his spray chart, right, of his hitting tendencies. So again, if I was doing a defensive shift, I would probably put more of my defenders on the right side of the field, as that is where more of his balls are going, right? So data-driven applications, data-driven recommendations that we can quantify and defend with our quantitative analysis here. So all that comes and stems from this crisp DM methodology of thinking about a data problems. However, there are some limitations with crisp DM, most notably how it lacks kind of the larger details around the data preparation as well as the final feedback and iteration that we see in big data problems today. So the second methodology that we introduced was the Rollins methodology, which has a lot more breakdown of how we clean and prepare or engineer our data? How do we collect the data? How do we understand the data? What are its limitations? How do we clean and prepare the data? How do we iterate on this, where we bring in multiple data sources? How do we combine those multiple data sources and use them together to power models? How do we evaluate the model, get feedback from our customers, and then go back and reiterate on the data product, on the model, go back even maybe all the way to the data collection set? So the context of this type of methodology is that a data product is a living thing in the computer science sense. We're not talking about AGI yet. That's like what the autonomous general intelligence. That's how my brain's not working right now. Artificial general intelligence, I guess. This is basically what OpenAI and Anthropic are trying to do right now. But yeah, in the computer sense, right? A data product, let's say you create this machine learning model, or you create this dashboard. It gets stale very quickly. We talked about data drift and model drift, how the underlying data may change over time. Customer tendencies in 2026 are very different than customer tendencies in 2015. Same thing, like I think I gave a baseball example where baseball strategy is different in 2016 versus in 2026 versus 2016. You also have model drift, right, where a model may not be representative of the truth anymore, maybe due to a fundamental shift in the underlying assumptions of the data product or the model. So how do we get constant feedback from users about the state of our data product, and how do we iterate on it to always keep it fresh? How do we always keep that data pipeline intact? And this is where data science differs from maybe the data science of 10, 15 years ago. Maybe 10, 15 years ago, your data science product was just a white paper, right? A slide deck, a PDF that lives for a moment in time that you pass across the desk to your manager. They read it once, make some decision, and then call it a day, and you go back to the drawing board. Today, especially in the scope of big data, streaming data, data constantly inundating businesses at every second of the workday, how do we make sure that our models, dashboards, products, AI tools are kept up to date to match that data velocity? So the Rollins methodology tries to incorporate more of that idea of a living data product. Cool. We walked through a lab. We walked through the three labs that we had for week one. Again, you didn't have to actually write any code in week one. We just ran through kind of this idea of how do I model or predict what kind of ingredients go with what types of cuisines. We loaded in a recipe of 57,000 rows. We did some data cleaning. We identified patterns and the ingredients per cuisine, and we trained a decision tree classifier to predict the probability of a cuisine just based on its ingredients. And finally, we evaluated the model on its utility. And all those notebooks that we ran in the live session are also available on my GitHub. We had a little bit of issues running them in the IBM lab. And again, that's why I back everything up on my own repository, just in case stuff like that happens live. So feel free to review the notebooks if you want. Again, we didn't have to write any code, and I don't recommend getting too hung up on the code itself. The big idea from these notebooks is what does these methodologies look like in practice? How do we go from a business question to a data question to acquiring data, cleaning data, building a model, and evaluating the model? Let's see. The last thing I wanted to end on is that understand the limitations of your models, of your data products, of your dashboards, of the data itself, right? I think especially non-technical stakeholders, they have this bias to think that whatever a data scientist or an ML engineer puts in front of them is gospel, is truth, will always be correct. And that is not the case at all. Again, this is most in the public eye with large language models doing hallucinations when they literally generate something that's totally wrong. But all models do this. Even a prediction model for cuisine, as we saw, it was only 50% right predicting like Korean cuisine, right? So models are wrong all the time, and we need to understand when and why models are wrong and how we can still generate utility from this. So George Brock summed this up as all models are wrong and some are useful. My old manager actually used to have this like printed out and put on the wall of his office, kind of when we were talking about statistical models being used in production. So I always like referencing this idea. Cool. We also discussed how data science in the real world in large organizations are often split into multiple kind of sub roles, and you may see these on Indeed, Monster, wherever you look for job postings. As a data scientist coming out of this cohort, you should be able to participate, apply for, and understand the responsibilities of all of these different hats. Data engineers, machine learning engineers, business analysts, right? Dashboarding analysts, MLOps and DevOps, CI/CD, constant development and deployment of models and products, data quality engineers, QA engineers, right? And as data scientists, we really have to wear many hats across all of these different roles and responsibilities. That was a lot of rambling. TLDR, week one, think like a data scientist. How do we take a generic, sometimes vague business question? How do we actually make it testable using data science and scientific methodology? How do we then create a product that can be used for decision making? And how do we constantly evaluate and iterate on those models and products to make sure that they stay up to date with the underlying assumptions and current representation of the world around us? Sweet. Looking ahead to week two. Week two is a doozy of a week. Week two is where we do our introduction to coding. In this cohort, no coding experience was necessary or really required. But if you don't have much coding experience, week two will be a long week. Everything about computer science in general, and then Python specifically, will be introduced all in week two. So some big ideas for week two. I like to think that there are four pillars of computer science: variables and data structures. Things are going to be like the nouns that we use in our coding programs. Conditionals, which is going to be if else statements, or control flow. How do we, if something is true, do work, otherwise else do something else. Loops, this can be while loops and for loops. I want to do X action on this noun 10 times, right? We're going to loop through and do this work a set number of times, or until a condition is met. And then finally, functions. Functions are ways to organize our coding tasks to make them reusable. This will also be incorporated into classes, which I think are also introduced in week two. So again, these ideas transcend Python. Any language you find, Rust, Java, JavaScript, C, C++, F sharp, C sharp, Pig. What else? I think I'm running low on languages. R, all these other things. I was trying to think of the like there's a language that's like just moo. I wonder if that's like cow moo language program element. Oh, there it is. Cow. There you go. This is a crazy language, by the way. This is not a real language. This is like a joke language. Yeah, we got some inappropriate words here. Yeah, this is it's a joke of a language. But again, it has the same idea, right? With whatever this programming language is, it's going to utilize um, I'm laughing at like how to programming for bovines. That's pretty funny. Anyway, given whatever language you choose to use, we're going to be using That's a little I guess Easter egg for any of y'all that actually watched to the end of this video. Anyway, with whatever programming language we have, we're going to be using data structures and variables as our nouns, control flow, conditionals, as well as loops to kind of structure the program, and then functions and classes to make our programs reusable. Finally, at the end of week two, we're going to highlight the most important part, which is going to be how do we start acquiring and collecting data from sources like APIs in Python. This is where we really kickstart out of computer science and jump into data science. So that's also going to be the notebooks that I'm going to introduce during the live session. The other big ideas for week two, don't feel like you need to memorize any of this. We're going to be reiterating on a lot of these computer science principles as well as kind of data acquisition methodologies throughout the whole boot camp. So we got another almost 3 months of all this work. So definitely don't memorize syntax. Don't feel like that you need to know the the minutia and the nuance of all of this stuff. It'll come with practice and repetition. And again, that's kind of the point of the next 10 weeks. So really what I want to emphasize, just get comfortable inside Jupyter notebooks, get comfortable reading and writing these codes and especially executing them. Use the solutions when they're given to you. Use AI tools. I don't care. Do whatever you need to. In fact, you don't need to finish every single lab or every single media set in week two. Again, all that's graded is the final quiz. And I'll also review a lot of things during our live session. So I know there's a lot of content in week two. Just figure out where you need help, where you need to review, where you need to focus, and spend the majority of your time there. And even though week two is a very heavy week with all this computer programming as well as data collection topics introduced, still only spend that 10 to 15 hours a week. Try not to get caught up in the details and stay looking at the big picture. So, as always, continue to engage in the discussion forums, follow the lounge where I post updates, watch these recordings, these recap videos. Part of why, again, I like this bootcamp, even though it is mostly async, is that I am live. I'm a real person. I watch these forums. I make these recordings every single week. I do the live sessions every single week. I don't reuse videos, in case you couldn't tell. I just do this live. Do it live, whatever. So please utilize us. We've been working in this industry. I've been in this industry for a decade, Karen for longer. We've seen a lot of it. I've been teaching this content since 2020, 2019. We've been around the block. We've seen the evolution of technology. So please utilize us as much as you want. And then finally, like I said, I back up everything in my GitHub. I've actually already backed up all of the notebooks for week two, which I also run live. I went through, downloaded all 26 notebooks a couple days ago, and I ran them all just to make sure that they all work, which they didn't actually. I actually ran into issues with one of these in module 210, which again I called out in the lounge for week two. So go peek on the lounge for week two if you haven't. But yeah, I had issues with this random user package and library, but it's not really relevant to the overall themes of the week. But again, I just want to reiterate that like I do this live, I run this content live, and I want to make sure that you all have the latest and greatest updates of all of the material that you'll be working through in the class. Definitely utilize my links, use my code as you need. Even the notebooks that didn't have solutions, I wrote my own solutions for. So if you ever get stuck running any of the hands-on labs, find the corresponding notebook in my repository and use that to help you as well. Cool. Just as a teaser, I'll leave you with what the week two discussion forums look like. In week two, we have our lounge, we have our live session Q&A, and we have two topics that nobody has contributed to yet. So get to work this weekend. I want to see your answers and participation in these two, I guess, module two threads. Cool. I think that's all I got. Big idea for week one. Think like a data scientist. Start understanding how to go from vague, less technical questions into a data-driven methodology in terms of answering it and how to communicate your insights back to non-technical stakeholders. And then in module two, intro to computer programming, and then a dash of data collection from APIs at the end, which again, we'll reiterate all of this over the next 8 or 9 weeks as well. I try to keep these recordings and recaps to 15 to 20 minutes. I went way over this time because I spent a long time reviewing the flow of the asynchronous campus. But again, typically this will be about 15 to 20 minutes. All right, you know where to find me. Reach out on the forums if you need help, and I will see you all on Monday for our Module 2 live session. Thanks, everybody. Have a great weekend, and I will see you in a few days.